that feeling that you mentioned that kind of bubbles up inside you is almost, it's like one of the many feelings that resonates with either the user or the kind of process that you know deeply and adds an important value to the problem that you're trying to solve. And I think that's part of a skill which is really important in a designer, is to be able to know when to kind of bring about these controversial discussions. And some might have more of a control on it, some might have less.
So amazing, Gavin. I'm so pleased that you've come to join me. And thanks for being part of this experiment. I feel a little bit nervous, just because this is quite a new thing for me. Not talking,
Yeah.
but talking to people in this kind of format. So I really honour your trust for coming to do this with me. So, and hopefully people can find this interesting. I think that you're interesting because I've met you. We actually met back in, I think it was 2014. Is that, that's what I had in my head. Is that what you had?
Yeah, I think so. It was around about that time, wasn't it?
It was a John Lewis,
Yeah.
and you came in, I think, to help on the iPad app. I think that's
Yeah, it was the, I think I joined the iPhone team originally,
iPhone
and
team.
then
Yeah.
got moved over to the iPad team.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, brilliant. So I did a little bit of snooping on your LinkedIn because I know you, but I don't know you. And I was sort of like, okay, Gavin, you worked for Rolls-Royce. That's where you started your career, which I thought was so interesting. Like when you think of design, and this podcast is about design. I mean, Rolls-Royce is that is a very kind of well-known brand that evokes design and is known for its design, really. So I find that very fascinating, and I see that from what I can see, I don't know if this is your character or framing of it, but you're you're one of these designers that also builds, and that seems to be what a lot of people are saying in the market, is that you've got to be the unicorn. And I was looking at your at everything you've done, and I was like, is Gavin a unicorn? What do you think about that?
Um,
Can you do it? You can build, you can design, you've made Figma plugins, like you've done UI, you've done UX, you've done research, like you're quite well rounded there from what I can see.
I like to think of myself as well-rounded. Yes. I um, I've always been a maker at heart. Um, when I was really young, I don't know if you remember those books. They're called How It Works, I think.
Yeah.
And there's loads of them on different kind of subjects, and I just remember one of them being about cars. And when I was younger, I used to take little model cars apart and then put them back together. And I used to enjoy figuring out how they worked. And so that's kind of stuck with me. But I've always I've always had that intuition, I guess, for artistic things, for graphic design. So that's where my background is in graphic design
Mm,
and art. But I always wanted to apply it to things that are functional.
mm,
Um, and so, yeah, so I've kind of like shifted back and forth between design, like the visual side of stuff, but then also this curiosity to kind of understand how it works and how I can bring it to life.
but
Um,
job titles, they're such a mess these days. And
hmm.
how, nobody likes UX anymore. It finally died, apparently. Now it's product design. Now it's not prompt engineers. What do you call yourself? Like, how do you describe what you do to people, given that you do so many different things?
I think for me personally, I have two types of personas. So I don't think I have like one sort of job title that I use when I talk to people, because I feel like I live a double life sometimes. So when it comes to the engineering aspect of it or the coding aspect of it, call myself a design engineer. Um, and when it comes to what is more typically my day job, then I describe myself as a UX designer. And I think, or a consultant. The reason why I still call myself a UX designer is because I feel like product design still doesn't encapsulate what it is I typically do in organizations that require my services. I think I was brought up when graphic design first, UX design first came about. And to me, that embodies a lot of the methodologies that are involved to try and understand your users and figure out what it is that they need from your service or your product. And the type of work that I do is a combination of tactical and strategic, but it's always time based or scope based. So I consider myself leaning more towards a UX designer when I'm doing that role because I have a very particular job that I need to do and I need to go in and do that.
Do you think like I've been very interested in this direction with AI and how it's really kind of disrupting our sector. Like you mentioned, like your day job, and then when you do consulting, like your day job. Yeah, I suppose your day job is the consulting, and then sort of what you do on the side is more like. Do you mean like Figma plugins and building
Yeah.
things and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Can you see a point where those two worlds will come together for you and maybe the sector? Like I'm seeing this whole thing of like, everyone can now build and, like we're now empowered with AI tools. Do you think that that's going to start blurring together, like for you personally, but maybe the sector as a whole?
Uh, I'm not sure. Um, I definitely have thoughts and some concerns about where it's going.
Mm.
I know the UX industry is changing, suffering a little bit at the moment. Um, whether my kind of two personas will kind of be utilized more as one. Um, I think the only real place I can see that happening is where maybe a company needs someone that is has a breadth of that knowledge, um, and can use it in a more strategic capacity potentially.
Mm.
Or perhaps they need those hard skills that you once had in your kind of experience of I've been working in this field for I feel like a long time,
Yeah.
and but I think some of those hard skills are almost like being converted into soft skills. So
Can you give
like,
me some examples?
um, well, being able to maybe appreciate what has an impact versus what doesn't when it comes to some of the more nuanced decisions that you have to make,
Mm.
like potentially like user research, for example. um, I think you quickly learn that it's a very useful tool to have, but knowing like how many people you should interview, what types of people, to like what extent you should go to, and also particularly what industry that company might be in. But I don't think necessarily they would need someone that can actually exercise that and implement that for them. Just someone who has knowledge of it to guide them in the right way.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was reading something about where AI is at the moment, and it seems to be very good at giving you like I think of it as divergent. It's very good at it's very good at diverging. It's very good at converging when you instruct it what to converge on, but to decide what to converge on, like the decision, like how do you reason? Okay, we've done this research. balancing that with, the where the market is, what the stakeholders want, how confident the tech team is at
Mm,
building something. Maybe they're not even very good at building something, and maybe they're not ready for that, or maybe there's a variety of inputs, but reasoning all those inputs, and some of them, and this is the thing I'm finding interesting about service design, is there is some types of input that isn't you can't feed into an AI machine, and so
mm,
it can't know what the sentiment is, and in some bits aren't data points. And what
yeah.
I'm seeing in AI is like it's not very good at making decisions. I think it's good at telling you what the decisions are. It's good at just immediately jumping into a decision and making it seem like it was a good idea.
Yes.
But it's not very good at really like reasoning. And my AI, ChatGPT, often tells me whenever I say I'm going to do this, it tells me how great that is that I'm doing it, and I get fooled by it. I think, oh yeah, it is
Yeah.
quite good, and then I go, hang on a minute, that's a terrible idea. You haven't thought of this, and then it goes, oh yeah, I haven't thought of that. You're absolutely right, and I'm just like, who am I talking to?
Yeah.
Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, massively. I mean, AI at the moment does a really good job of giving the impression that it's smarter than it is.
Yeah,
Um, and I think that's interesting in itself because it is really smart. Like in terms of the achievement, it's gone from a scenario where we didn't have AI to where we do now. It's an incredible leap. And I think it also just proves how much you can do with very little to a degree. The thing that it doesn't have at the moment anyway is it doesn't have lived experiences. It hasn't been through what you've been through or any other other kind of human being, as far as I know. I mean, I'm sure there's someone out there, looking at how they can make that happen, or it is making it happen.
do do you mean like how? So you've had a fair bit of experience, I mean, God, almost yeah, 2 decades. Like
Mm,
you must go into a gig and you must reason on the cuff to some extent of like, I don't think that's a good way to go. I think we'd be better off building it, in this way, or using this design system, or even I noticed you're very into typography.
mhm.
These fonts they're generally better for this, and you have a sort of like, I guess, a bit like a gut instinct, which is sort of formulated on unconscious experiences that have kind of
Yeah,
gone in there.
yeah,
That's your LLM, right?
yes,
That is able to kind of regurgitate and give a good sense of reasoning. And that's not really necessarily the same as knowing everything.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I have done a bit of reading in the past with regards to like what how different parts of your brain work, and I'm no expert in this field, but the baseline of what I kind of understand, or something that's really stuck with me, is that there's a part of your brain that's responsible for rational thinking, and a part of your brain which is responsible for emotional thinking, and it's the emotional side which is more evolved than the rational side, and it responds to things instantly, much quicker.
Oh God,
So,
that's me and my 4-year-old son every day. Yeah.
so I think you can that's the kind of visceral gut reaction that usually comes with that experience. So
Right.
that story of the workers who are picking out the chicken eggs to find out whether it's a male or female egg, and there's no visible thing that tells you whether it's female or male, but they're incredibly good at filtering out the eggs based on that.
They just know.
They just know. It's just like an instinct.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I think that's the same thing that you have as a person when it comes to being able to make some of these decisions. You just have this instinct. You might not even know why yourself. It's just a feeling. But that
Interesting.
feeling is incredibly well tuned.
Yeah, it is feelings, isn't it? It's like I sometimes. and I've been exploring this with my therapist actually. When I'm in a meeting or a workshop, and something doesn't feel right, like I was in a gig a few months ago, and it was my first meeting, first workshop, and I've been really reflecting about this actually. That what they were explaining was they were building something out of the box, and one of the designers was basically like designing lots of Figma screens. Was about to, and they were pulling it from out of the box, and the developer was like, "Yeah, I'm going to go build it," and the designer's like, "I'm going to go design it," and this feeling came up inside me of like,
Mm.
something doesn't sound right about that. Like, why are we designing things when it's out the box? Like, what I saw was like a designer and a developer not quite understanding what each other was going to be building, and they were going to go off separately and then come back together, which I mean could work, but it didn't seem like very efficient to me. So I have this feeling coming up.
Mm.
It's like a bubble. And it's like,
Yeah.
I've got to say it. I've got to say it. And this is something I really struggle with in my own like practice. I find it really hard to shut up. And so I just said it. I just said, I don't understand why the designer's designing that when developers doing it out of the box. And it was quite like, it for me, it was so uncomfortable to not say it.
Mm.
The feeling was there, but then equally, like I think when I threw that in, it was quite destabilizing for some people because it was like, who's this guy? What? Why is he telling me I shouldn't be doing this? And so feelings for me is something I'm really like trying to work out what my relationship with my
Hmm.
feelings in a work environment, because so much of it is like logic based and rational and
Hmm.
reasoning. And I remember someone, John Lewis actually,
Hmm.
someone said to me, she said like the people that do well here are the ones that are less emotional. And she said that's generally men and women that have pretend to be a bit more like men in
Right.
their emotional expression.
Hmm.
And I've been thinking a lot about that and my own relationship to emotions in work. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah. I think it's well, it makes me think of something that I've seen sort of floating around recently in terms of discussions with UX. As there's sort of debate as to whether when you have a UX designer join the team, replace it with product designer if you want
Yeah.
to, anyone that sort of empathizes with the user, whether like a designer who causes some like ruffles some feathers or not is a good thing or not. And I think the point that I've seen made, which is the best one, is that they care enough to kind of speak aloud about that. Like that feeling that you mentioned that kind of bubbles up inside you is almost it's like one of the many feelings that resonates with either the user or the kind of process that you know deeply, and adds an important value to the problem that you're trying to solve. And I think that's part of a skill which is really important in a designer, is to be able to know when to kind of bring about these controversial discussions. And some might have more of a control on it, some might have less. um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think emotion's important in those in doing a job of a designer. 100%. I guess it's just a question of, there's also the like mentality of being able to ship a product, and I think that's where the emotion can get in the way sometimes. Like.
Yeah, you know what, that connects to something that you talked a little bit about, and I don't know if I'm drawing a bridge here, um, if this works, but like with the role of emotions in design, like I think as you say, like we're trained to be empathetic, and I personally get like my fuel to feel motivated when I sort of feel, yeah, when I feel different emotions, I feel excited about, spotting something that maybe no one else has seen and I
Mm,
can share it and then it gets everyone excited. Or maybe I've had really good conversations with a user and then I make a change to my prototype and I test it again. And then the next set it works and I get excited. And that's what, I don't really care what sector I'm in. Like, I'm just getting excited because something I've made is working and it's connecting and
yeah.
that emotion. But I see the other side of that and it's something that you posted a bit about and it's something I've had personal experience about is burnout.
Mm,
Burnout in design and I see that there is some I'm seeing that like froth up in some of my like LinkedIn feeds and stuff and people talking about burnout and I've had personal experience of it over a decade ago and I know that other people have like what I wonder like as someone that I think has had some experience and like how does design affect your mental health? How have you navigated that? Like the ups and the downs and the challenging parts. Like what are the nuggets that you've collected that have worked for you?
um, well, firstly, I think I start off by saying that now is it particularly, I think, is a very difficult time for a lot of people. So I think there's when people experience burnout, there's a combination of stuff that are internal factors, things that are going on with your life, and some that you can control, some that you can't. And
Yeah.
then there's also external factors like what's happening in the world. And I think that is what's like it's especially difficult for me because those are things I can't control.
Mm.
Um, and then with regards to I've actually sorry, I've actually had a memory blank in terms of what the original question was.
No, well, I was wondering like what the impact of design has been
Ah, yes.
on your mental health, positively
Yeah.
or negatively. And also, just to touch in what you said, like that really resonates. Like my experience of burnout was that there were some aspects that I couldn't control that were going on outside of design. But
Yeah.
then I was in a design world. I needed it to make money, and I was having to deal with like really challenging stakeholders at the same time,
Yeah.
and a rolling situation. And so that just created this kind of temporary collapse in my ability to function,
Yes.
really.
Yeah. I
But
mean, I can 100% resonate with that. I actually kind of recently went through some health changes that kind of like had a big impact on my confidence, the way that I treat anxiety. And then in terms of in my job, that had a knock-on effect. I think luckily the people that I found myself surrounded by in design have always been really supportive.
mm,
Um, I've always had the opportunity to kind of like have someone maybe support me from the back when I've felt like I've been at my lowest. I think the most difficult part is the fact that as a freelancer, someone who works for themselves, you're ultimately responsible for finding that income. So, when you finish the contract, even if you might have the support of people within that job, in between that time, you've got to pick yourself up and find yourself another job. And I think that's been the most challenging side of it. In terms of like design itself and kind of what effect it's had, I think for the most part positive. Design is in everything that I do outside and inside of work. And the skills that I've learned in it, especially the problem solving skills, I use all the time. I guess maybe one side of it, which I don't know if it's more because it's me or if it's the influence that design has had, but that's being so like very aware of things. And so that kind of like I'm the sort of person that gets easily distracted because of that outside of jobs. If someone says something and it just takes me that extra second to like compute it if it's something that isn't like a normal straightforward thing.
Yeah.
Because I've been kind of trained to think of every edge case as a designer. My job, one of my responsibilities is to think of every possible scenario that a
Mm,
user could find themselves in.
mm,
And like when it comes to life, I do that. It just comes naturally to do the same thing. Like we had a house renovation that we started 10 years ago, and it's a bit of a curse and a blessing
yeah.
because I can plot every possible scenario and detail that will go right and wrong with it.
Yeah.
And it's a curse to be someone who is aware of those details. But at the same time, you know, to have that ability to see those details, to have an influence, and to create something that no one else might think of doing.
It's a muscle that we've been encouraged to cultivate in our jobs. You know, I almost kind of feel like it's a slightly kind of anxious
Mm.
state of sort of having this peripheral awareness that in some gigs, not all gigs, but some
Yeah.
gigs can be really useful because you're like spotting on the horizon, you know, oh, you know, that Jura ticket didn't have that detail. You know, that edge case was missed. You know, nobody's thought of this scenario. You know, or if you're coding, you know, you might be thinking about certain aspects of the code, and that's it for me. Like, I find there's like a sort of mixed relationship with that. Like some of it, I have this like deep thought, which I kind of like just love that space where my mind is just going into that place. But in another, especially when things get operational,
Mm.
that's where I get, you know, and I try to steer away from gigs where it's about going live and about
Mhm.
launching and ops and stuff like that, because that just scares the crap out of me because it's just so hairy. You know, you press the button, it's all good. It's not, I mean, it reminds me, my first gig, I was working for a travel company and I hadn't really like, I didn't have much experience. You know, I was coding in ASP and the whole website had a header on it. The whole website was made in ASP, and the header had a ASP header on it. You know, it's just a banner,
Yeah.
and I had made a code change to the banner. And these days, like in Dreamweaver, there's no like syntax. You know, like it doesn't tell you if you've broken the syntax and stuff. And so I just put like a bracket in the wrong place or something. But because what ASP would do is if one part of the code is broken, it kills the whole runtime thing. So the
Yeah.
whole site went down. And I had someone coming down to me and they're like, we're losing 10 grand an hour, which doesn't sound like a lot these days, but back in 2000, it was a big deal. And
Yeah.
I was alone. There was no one there. And I was, you know, sweating, trying to figure it out. And I was just like, after that, I was like, you know what? I just can't do operational stuff. Like it's too, it doesn't work for my nervous state at all.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting do you say that because I think I quite like some of the operational stuff.
Really?
I like being a person who knows how the stuff operates.
Mm,
I don't know if I'd like to be the person, like you say, especially now and today's like technology stack that, you know, exists and the number of users that some services get to actually be the person that pushes the button. But like for me, that element of how it gets out of my monitor onto, you know, someone's device and in what way and how they react with it and what's actually happening in the real world, you know, like even beyond, like it's one thing to do user testing and have people using a prototype or even using the real thing, but in that kind of fake environment. So I'm really interested in that. Well, I say really, like to a degree, interested in the operational side of stuff. You know, at the end of the day, if you're working on something as a designer and it doesn't operate or it doesn't you know, it never sees the light of day, then I'm sure you're the same, you know, like there's you're in it for it to be real.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. To have an impact,
yeah.
right? Yeah, definitely. I I'm curious, like thinking about this kind of types of roles that work for different emotional types or non-emotional types, and like what do you think? What kind of environments do you think create good designers? Like so less about the person, but more the environment. And something I've always been fascinated in. Like what cultures and environments make good designers? Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
Um, I'm just trying to think of like my past and
I
kind of.
could speak a little bit to it at John Lewis, if that's
Mhm.
just to give you a minute to think.
Yeah, sure.
Like like I used to think about things like well, not at John Lewis, I didn't think about it, but it existed, was a fair degree of psychological safety. And
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
that what I'm learning is what I've had in certain environments, but I didn't know that's what it was called. But it was kind of where I didn't really feel like I'd get fired if I said, unless I was like really offensive or said something really awful, like I wasn't going to get kicked out any minute. And I didn't see other people just getting
Mm.
canned instantly. I can remember my first sort of 10 years, I never saw anyone get fired, never saw anyone quit or anything like that. Whereas in the last 10 years, I've been in environments where I've seen people get fired. I've
Mm.
seen, people just not turning up one day, they've left, and it seems very tense. And there's this sort of, and I don't think that's just me. I think
Yeah.
cultures and stuff have shifted. And I've also seen environments, positive ones, where there's been a real effort to spend time getting to know each other without necessarily just going straight into like the project or the work, but like, oh, how are you doing? Like, what's what's
Yeah.
what's your world? And that just people caring a little bit, I think, can help one feel a bit safer. And then for me, that helps me do better work.
Yeah.
Does any of that resonate?
Yeah, definitely. As a freelancer or as a contractor, you often find yourself in environments where you have worries and concerns about how comfortable you'll feel psychologically within that project. Um, and the projects that I've enjoyed the most, I think, have been where I felt like, as you say, like there isn't necessarily that feeling that I feel like I'm going to lose my job if I say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Um, there's always an element of that in contracting, especially when you're working with the end client.
Mm.
And I think it's good to have it because it kind of keeps you on form. But to have some support within the project, whether it's with the end client or if you're working with an agency where they respect that you're a human being as well.
Yeah.
And people make mistakes and people have lives and, need to be able to take your cat to the vet, for example, at maybe like a moment's notice, or you've got a hospital appointment or something like that. Those have those are the ones where I feel like I've produced the better work
Mm,
because
mm.
I'm not there to mimic the idea of working. I'm there I'm actually producing work that's meaningful. I've been on projects where I've had someone checking my Figma file to see like how the progress has been.
Really?
And as a
Wow.
freelancer who loves autonomy, to kind of
Yeah.
like rejig my day, I even had to go to the lengths of like copying and pasting stuff in the file just to make it appear like it, the file history was like
Oh my
having an
God.
effect.
Oh my God.
Like I don't know whether that person was actually like going to that detail to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would always work in another file because as a freelancer, that's kind of like how I, what works best for me. In this particular project, it wasn't a very collaborative one. but yeah, sometimes, like you do feel under that pressure to maybe avoid conflict. I don't know whether that, that maybe that's something I could have learned from, in terms of maybe there was a better way to handle it, but it was a way that worked for me at the time.
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it, as a freelancer about like what and something I think a lot about is like what kind of relationships do I want with my clients? Like,
Mm,
so I like to have an honest relationship where I'll tell them if I think that what they're telling me to do doesn't need to be done, and so it's better that they don't pay me anymore
yeah,
and stop the work. I'd like to feel that I can be that honest as opposed to like, well, I'll just take the money and do whatever, because I feel like it's two way. Like if I can bring that authenticity in, then hopefully they can bring authenticity in. And I think where I feel the most stressed is where I'm having to read like multiple layers of
hmm,
what's really happening. And I
yeah,
think that's something that I've when I was in managerial roles, I used to do quite a lot. They might say effectively or not. I'd let them judge whether I was effective at it. But to sort of story tell, and I've done that in jobs I was in where the whole company was in free fall, and
hmm,
people didn't know if they were going to be fired any day, and people were getting fired, and so I then had to. My role then was to sort of give some orientation about what is happening. Like so and so has said that because they think this is going to happen, and so doesn't want that to happen. So they always say this, but they don't really mean this,
yeah,
And it's just kind of like, and I did that on a recent gig with a colleague I was working with, and I was explaining to them why my read on the situation of why meetings seemed odd. And I was like, I think it's odd because so and so doesn't understand agile, or so and so hasn't done a GDS project before, or has only learned this in a boot camp, or what have you. And so that's why they're
yeah,
coming at it from this angle. But that's so much cognitive drag.
mm,
Like I'm using up so much brain power
yeah,
to try and interpret some signals that I think I'm seeing because like everything doesn't seem authentic and real. And so I'm having to kind of disentangle and translate it. And then I've got to go and do some research or
yeah,
design on top of that. But I find that all of that mess that can happen
yeah.
with people and humans and awkwardness and lack of psychological safety, like just creates all of that wash. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're incredibly sensitive to all the details as a designer, aren't you? So, it doesn't just include the problem itself, it
The
includes the
product.
team
Yeah.
you work with. And
Yeah.
um, if you're an introvert like me, those things can tire you out really quickly, like
Right.
drain your battery as such. Um, I think it's trying to uh, find yourself, protect yourself from some of those conversations, and sometimes manager is really good for doing some of that. Um, but it probably also comes from the culture of the company you're working with.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And what people are seeing modeled by the leaders, I think is very
yeah.
important. I saw incredible, like John Lewis is probably, there was a senior director there, and he was just remarkable. I've never seen anyone like him, and he modeled like what he preached, and
Hmm.
he would, yeah, he would like genuinely like care about people,
Hmm.
but yet he was also like very effective and all this. But his communication skill was off the chart. Like he could explain the complexities of pensions to everybody and keep the room like attentive. Which
It
was quite.
it's really inspiring, isn't it, when you meet people like that, and you think maybe there is hope for me after all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm curious, like, and if you need a minute to think about this, please take it. But can you think of anyone that you've worked with, and you don't have to call their name out, but just sort of maybe remark upon what it was that was inspiring about them. But have you worked with someone or a couple of people in particular that have reshaped your design practice? And yeah, take your time.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, there's been quite a few people. I think I take a little bit from a lot of people that I work with. Um, I think the first experience was probably you mentioned that I used to work at Rolls-Royce. That was kind of like a that was what was called a year in industry. So it's like the opportunity to experience working for a company before you went into further education.
Ah,
Um, and I was actually using um, front page.
front page.
Yeah, so
Boom.
I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore. But
I haven't
my
heard that
manager
for so long.
my manager at the time, he was such a supportive person as a human being
Yeah.
that it just showed me what real warm, supportive, like a supportive person that you work with actually feels like. And I'm fortunate that I had it at such a young age. Um, Other people that I've worked with, um, other thing. I mean, I work. There's not often that I work in companies where I'm a contractor and there's another contractor. Like the difficulty I've got when I have people who like they come to me for recommendations. They say, "Hey, Gavin, can you like recommend a good UX designer?" And I think if you're like me and you have such a high standard, a high bar for like what you think makes someone good, or like maybe it's not so much that they're good, but that you know enough about them that you would recommend them and like
Yeah.
have your name on the line. I think is probably
Yeah.
a better
Yeah.
way to put it. Um, and there's not many people that I feel like I understand enough, but the people that I've really enjoyed working with, you get to see their inner workings a lot easier.
Mm.
And I've had one person in particular which I'm happy to shout out, which is Laura Block, and she's just such an amazing person to work with because she kind of shows you what her thought process is, and at the same time, very empathetic. Kind of gets what you've got going on in life, but at the same time, uh, you know, adds the context when it matters.
Mm.
When you need to kind of move a project forward, um, applies what's important at that moment.
Sounds like
Um,
she's able to really balance the left and the right side of the brain, of being
oh,
both empathetic
massively.
and deeply pragmatic and practical all at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's another skill that you just mentioned. Being pragmatic. I think being able to, when we were talking earlier about like emotional, um, bringing emotions into it, is being able to like compartmentalize those. I think it doesn't mean that you don't still have those emotions. You might feel that frustration or you might feel that passionately about something, but you're able to choose when it's exposed.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. I want to slowly draw us to a close. I'm so enjoying this conversation, but I'm also wanting to keep the fire hot,
Yeah.
as well. So I had three final questions, which I think are fairly easy to answer. But what could you say what you're most proud of that you've designed? Is that something that you can draw upon quite quickly?
Um, it's actually a difficult one because I think there's some things that I've designed which I feel I'm most proud of because of the impact it's had.
Yeah, great.
And then there are other projects that I'm proud of because of guess what I've been able to achieve. So um, probably the thing that's had the most impact, I think, has probably been my government work that I've done.
Yeah,
Working in the government has been really rewarding to be able to see how that's made an impact to everyday life and in people in the country that I'm part of, and also to see that policy change happen within governments has been really interesting. And then the other thing that I've been really proud of is the Figma plugins, which is like a massive
Yeah.
part of what I've been doing for the last 4 years.
Do you want to give a quick shout out to maybe some of the best plugin that you made?
Yeah, I think it has to be Table Creator,
Table
which
Creator.
just
Yeah,
makes
I've
it
had
easier
that
to
one.
create tables.
Yeah. So it was, sorry, just to share for people that don't know what it is. Yeah, tell
Yeah,
me.
sure. So, if you use Figma and you try to create a table in your UI design, you find that actually it's quite convoluted. It's quite difficult. It's a bit easier now that you've got grids, but otherwise it's still quite a pain. So Table Creator allows you to create tables more easily, but what makes it different from some of the other plugins that also create tables is it connects to your design system. So when you're creating the tables, if you ever need to update the design of those tables, it comes back to your design system. You can modify your components, your cell component, and it will propagate that change through all the tables you've created.
Amazing. And that's the one that's had like 500K plus downloads. Is that right?
Yeah, it's nearing on 600 and something thousand now.
Very impressive.
Yeah, so
That's a
like
great number.
and as an achievement, yeah, I think that's something I'm really proud of.
And finally, what are you working on right now?
Right now, I am working on a toolkit for people who want to create their own plugins, Figma plugins. So it version 1 already exists, but the next version, it just kind of takes it to that next level in terms of the problem that I see with Figma plugins at the moment is that they're very low barrier to entry to actually create a plugin. But when it comes to creating one that is enterprise
Great.
ready or
Yeah.
kind of works within works as like other modern software does, it's quite difficult. And that's where Plugma helps because it allows you to create enterprise grade plugins that are testable and are easy to manage, predictable. It gets rid of all the unnecessary configuration and just makes it so you can just focus on developing the plugin and ensuring that it works for your users.
Amazing. I was going to say Figma must love you, but I think I read they gave you a grant to work on this, right? Did I
So
read that right?
the grant was on another plugin which I
Another plugin.
created, which is called Figlet.
Figlet.
And again, you can see a theme happening. So
Yeah, yeah.
I just like showing people how easy it is to, I guess, not just create plugins, but also to like how to learn how to code.
Yeah.
Because I came from that same position where I wanted to bring things to life, and I think creating plugins, whether it's a Figma plugin or a plugin for something else like Framer or Canva, they're really good places to start because they're not too big of a problem to solve, and you have complete autonomy over every aspect of it.
A designer's dream.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. Gavin, it's been so good to talk to you. You have kicked this off in the best way that I could have wanted. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and this is exactly what Deeply Human Design podcast is all about. Is just understanding like what's it like for the people that do the design, and I think you've shared that really well. So thank you so much.
Well,
Yeah, thank you, Gavin. And we'll be having many more of these conversations, and maybe Gavin, we can have another conversation a little further down the track if people like this kind of content and material. We can chat again. That'd be great.
yeah,
Awesome,
definitely. Thanks ever so much for
great.
having me.
Thanks, Gavin.